So we have to have our own narrative of what history has been and what history is and what history can be used for. As Dr. Clark, our great scholar, said it best, history can be our clock to tell us where we come from, what time it is, and where we need to go. History can be a compass for us to let us know what we have to do and what we haven't done, so that we have to make sure that we don't build our narrative of socialization, how we get our values, and acculturation, how we fit into society, based upon the lies of European superiority and African inferiority. But we have to understand that we have suffered through a process of dehumanization, but our resilience and our strength has allowed us to rise. And we can say, as Maya Angelou said, "And still I rise." And African symbols of rebirth and resurrection, even after death and destruction, show that the Africans built into their culture a consciousness that out of death and destruction can come new life. And this is what is the lesson of HAPI, that there is resilience in the ecological systems of the earth, there's resilience in the human family on earth, and there's resilience in the mysteries of the universe and the divine order of the universe that is not fully understood. But it all represents a chance to bring out of death and destruction new life, and to do as the Africans understood they were doing, build for eternity.
Hey, everybody. Listen, it's so good to be with you guys tonight. We have a really exciting show. I want to first just apologize because we had an unforeseen incident that happened. So don't worry, we will be bringing Dr. Newton and Dr. Melvo back shortly, probably next week, so that we can get this conversation about reparations happening. Before we get started, just a couple of things that we want to, I guess you can call them housekeeping things, but some things we want to talk to our HAPI viewers about. So last week, 2 weeks ago, we had Dr. Runoko Rashidi on, which was a fabulous HAPI Talks. It was great. We learned a lot as a community, and it was great. And actually, his video garnered almost 80,000 viewers. Okay, 80,000 people tuned in to watch this video. However, only 6% of 80,000 people actually subscribe to the channel. And when we look at all our videos, all the videos, we're seeing that we're getting upwards to 10,000, 20,000 views on these videos, but no one's subscribing. So it's very important, okay, that we support each other in a real way. It costs absolutely nothing just to click the subscribe button and hit the notifications and like the video, or not like the video, but at least subscribe. This HAPI Talks was created out of a necessity, not only for myself and for Taki and the rest of the HAPI team, but it was really, a way that we can all learn collectively. And one of the things, one of the major principles of HAPI is, this whole idea of cooperative economics, but it's not one way. We have to support each other in a real way. So it's not just about going out and buying Black every day, but it's about Black businesses also supporting one another. And when we look at HAPI and we just think about how this film was created, one, it was produced, the production company we use is a Black production company. Our flyers, we have a lot of flyers out there on the street, but that's done by 360, which is a Black graphic artist, person, and he has his own company. And a lot of what we do, our t-shirts, is by Nubia Apparel. These are all Black companies. We try to, at all costs, support each other. So it's really important that everyone that's viewing these videos just subscribe. It costs, like I said, it costs nothing, but it goes a long way in making sure that we can keep bringing, bringing this content to everyone. The other piece is that, and just to let everybody know that we will be bringing back Dr. Rashidi pretty soon, within the next couple of weeks, because he has a lot more to share with and share and show with us. But it's just very important that we support one another. And the next two guests, I mean, there's no way they could have gotten where they are without their support of each other. But we're gonna get back to, we're not gonna touch that right now. We're gonna come back to that. So our next screening is October 3rd at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, if you can't wait till October 3rd, you can go to the to hapifilm.com and you can get a DVD, or you can hit the link and you can get a digital download. So if you don't want to wait, you can do one of those two things. The other piece, though, is that when you do the screening, and listen, you can do both. You can do the screening collectively with everyone, and then you can purchase the DVD, because there's just so much information that you're going to want to, look at again, share with people, and all that good stuff. But one of the benefits of actually watching it, a screening online, is that afterwards we send everybody a Zoom link, and then we get to have a very personal conversation with some of the HAPI cast members. In the past, we've had, let me see, Dr. Georgina Falou, we've had Dr. Jacqueline Badalora, Professor James Small, Dr. Leonard Jeffries, Dr. Rosalind Jeffries. We've had Asar Imhotep, Philippe Matthews have actually hosted a couple of them. We had Dr. Solange Ashby. So it's really a cool way in a smaller setting to, after you watch the film, to process it, because you're going to have questions. I have questions every single time I watch it, and I probably watched it 1,000 times. But I always learn something new. So it's really important that, if you don't want to wait, you can get the DVD, and you can get the Vimeo download, but it's really cool to watch it collectively. And so October 3rd, 2020 at 7 p.m., we're going to watch the film together. The other thing is that I'm just checking my notes because I need to make sure that I don't forget anything. Just one thing to be said about the cooperative economics. So most of you, and let me be clear, everyone that shows up and watches these videos, and we see you guys making comments, and we know that you're out there, we're not talking to y'all. You guys are holding it down, and we can see in the comments in some of these videos, there's a lot of people who don't have, who are not thinking about our community like we think about our community, and they're leaving really nasty comments. Okay. And we try to go through them, but we just appreciate, I want to say from the bottom of our heart, we really appreciate you guys out there, warriors, shuttingpeopledown.com. We love it. Thank you. We're going to keep that going. But we really appreciate that. But again, be at 6%. So we need more subscribers. That way we got a lot of cool things happening. And so we want to make sure that we're able to make that happen. And lastly, our store. So another way that you can support us, and by supporting us, we're able to reach more people, because it's not just about the people who show up, that are very conscious, that they're following us on HAPI Talks, and also following us, like on YouTube and Instagram. But it's really for people who don't know about the power of HAPI, and that's really what it's about. This principle is key, because it's what's going to help us to be successful as a Black community. Okay. If we can support one another in this basic way, then we can start to build our own communities so that we can control, as Dr. J says, the economics, the politics, and culture in that community. So we don't have to bear witness of the horrible thing that happened with Breonna Taylor yesterday. So this is why it's very important for us to to support one another. All right, so that's been enough of me talking about all the stuff that we need to do. And this is very just very important to us. The only reason why we are doing this is because of how much we love ourselves and we love our people. And this is, we need more people to support that. And it's not just about, saying, oh, I like HAPI or I've seen HAPI, but it's also about putting your economic dollars behind it. And so anything that you can do, you can donate to hapifilm. Like if you go to hapifilm.com, you can donate to us. But the other piece is like buying merchandise and buying the DVDs. And I'm gonna steal a little trick here from Dr. J, because every time I've done an interview with him, he's always holding something up. But when you go to HAPIFilm, we have all the DVDs. We have HAPI DVD, but the first two we have Nubia and we have the Tekken. And so when people see HAPI, they're like, oh my God, this film came out of nowhere. But actually, this film came out of those two films. So it's very important. You can go and you can get those and just support. Very, very important. All right, so we're going to get started. And these two guys, I tell you, it's like I don't know if there's a way that I can introduce them that's not I will leave out so much, like so many important things about them. But they are the reason why I'm here, for sure. It's the reason why HAPI exists in terms of this film, is because of these two gentlemen. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Dr. Leonard Jeffries and Professor James Small. Oh, what happened to Professor Small? He must have walked out for a second. Oh, he's back. There we go. All right. Oh, he got books in his hands too. How are you doing, Dr. J?
I'm doing fine. When you reach your 83rd birthday, you're hoping for the 84th, and then hopefully it'll go up to the 94th. But I'm doing well. I can't complain.
Yes. Yeah. Your birthday is in January 19th or 18th?
Well, it's January the 19th, but so many of us are born in that Capricorn period, the end of December and the all through the middle of January. It's amazing. But of course, we can't get spooked by the fact that, so many of us are the so-called Capricorns. And some almost made it. Van Sertima almost made it, but he missed by a day or two. But he still has been able to be part of these great schools of knowledge that we've been able to put together. And now we need a process to tap into the schools of knowledge. Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark represent schools of knowledge, and we've been right by their side, and we've been at the feet of these great brothers, and getting part of our development is appreciating what they have to give. And so we've got to make sure that this explosion of knowledge over these last 50, 60 years is transferred to our people globally as much as possible, so that they can empower themselves.
Yes. All right, Professor Small, how you doing up there?
Sleepy, but I'm good. Good to see Dr. J. It's hard to get him on the phone, but at least HAPI allows me to see him once a week.
Yes.
And it's good to see Alicia back from vacation.
But look at her. She's radiant. That's terrible. Look at the glow. Look at the smile. And look at those earrings.
No, well, okay, I love my Ankh earrings. I tell you, 125th Street has everything. But no, this light is like glaring, so it's just giving me this glow. And plus I'm getting to talk to you guys. You guys don't understand. I love sitting down and chatting with you guys. So this is great. And this is something that this topic, and just to let everybody know, we were actually going to do this next week, but because we had to do a little switcheroo, we're getting ready to be blessed right now. And so I want to just go ahead and get started with the first question in terms of these secret societies. So what is the difference between a secret society and a society of secrets?
Dr. J?
Well, there's nobody on the planet that I know who studied the question of secret societies or societies of secrets than Professor James Small. he has been transformed in unbelievable ways. And so he's been introduced to these various societies of secrets, and my circumstance also. But he's gone heavy into it, and he's seen the power of these societies and how there's a mix of this esoteric high knowledge, but there's a spiritual component that has to be made a part of it. You don't want to give this high, powerful knowledge to somebody who is spiritually at the lowest level. So the knowledge combined with your spiritual sense of mission creates a greater force, and that's when we see the greatness of HAPI, the Nile Valley, and that speaks to the various levels of the societies of secrets that are there. I mean, but many times, and Dr. Ben was the person who opened it to us, and he kept talking about these societies of secrets, but he was trying to let us know that they have an ancient history, but they're alive, and they need to be refurbished, regenerated, and passed on to us. And when I had the chance to go with Dr. Ben to the Nile Valley the first time in '82, when he took a couple of hundred people, we went through Cairo. So we saw the Great Pyramids and what all that represented. But when you go south, up the Nile, or you come into the area of Luxor and the Valley of the Kings and the Queens, and then you see a whole nother level of construction and architecture designed to tap into this special power. And so there is the Great Lodge of Luxor, the Waset temple complex. And it's an extraordinary spiritual space. And then when we first went there, Dr. Ben, of course, said that we're going to get up early in the morning, so you better go to bed and be ready to get up early in the morning. And so most people went up into the hotel to get ready in the morning, but I wasn't going up into the hotel. I faked it. I went up into the hotel, and then when I got a chance, I came down and climbed over the walls and had my spiritual fortification and regeneration in this pillared temple complex. And it was designed for that. Can you imagine? It's in ruins now. It's been in ruins for thousands of years, but still, the power and force was clearly there as far as I'm concerned. And then to top that off and later go to its counterpart in the Sudan, in Nubia. And then you again have the great pillar temple at the great Holy Mount. And again, the pillar temples for the male and the females. There's this balance and harmony. So there's a lot for us to learn, and we need to get it organized so we can transfer it without people being afraid of it, or people thinking they can get it to misuse it and do the wrong negative thing. So these trips to Africa, Brother Small and myself and the others around us, including my wife and Brother Small's family and whatnot, we turned them into spiritual pilgrimages, not tourists dazzling and whatnot. So when our story is told about our relationship with the continent and the many trips that we've made, it's a spiritual process, a regeneration of your strength and whatnot. So but Brother Small, he is a person who's studying it, and he is it. And so that's the thing. He don't want y'all to know, but it's too late now. And he's getting a little older, so we just had to let the world know that Brother Small don't operate on no Mickey Mouse. He operates on the real deal, the African spiritual power. And so, but I have much more to say in reference to the schools of knowledge that our people have tapped into. Knowledge is power, but you cannot use that power unless you are structured in such a way as to be able to transfer it. the intergenerational transformation. They made that into a whole ritual process and a controlled process. Europeans tried to copy it. So you saw the Greeks trying to do some things they thought the Africans did, but they didn't have the spiritual power. They had the form without the substance. And you see that again in the European history with Rome. So they try to tap into this. And then later Europeans, they wanted a bit of it. The Europeans went to the extent of digging up African remains and crushing the bones and using it to get some kind of power. And so they thought. And so there was a whole industry of going into the African sacred burial grounds and then taking the bones and putting them, marketing them. That's the European. That's the value system of materiality when our core value system is spirituality.
Yes.
So we have to have that understanding, and nobody can do it better than Professor Small, but he may be a little tired because he's been traveling. And then he needs to be in a setting, this type of setting with this Zoom and all the rest of that. That's not the setting, but we're in trouble. So we need to take any setting that we can get. We're supposed to be sitting, looking at each other, feeling each other.
Yes.
Then there's a female component, and then there's a male component, And so I'm just glad that in this period of time, so many of us have been able to tap into the source of knowledge and regenerate African power. And so we're in a period of African Renaissance. Now, people say, how the hell could you be in a period of African Renaissance? People are out in the street marching, people are getting shot, the economy is collapsing, they're spreading diseases. But in spite of all of that going around us, the chaos, we are in a period of African Renaissance. I date it from 1945 to 1995 because there's so much has gone on in these schools of knowledge and this explosion of information. You have to have something that you can handle. And so I use the pyramid analysis so we can claim our pyramids, but we can take that form of the triangle and use it as we process information. At one polarity is economics, at the opposite polarity is politics. And so there's a relationship of economics and politics, a balance and a harmony. And then at the top of the pyramid, you have culture. Culture is the key because culture tells you what type of economics to become involved in. Economics that shares people's material and spiritual well-being, or exploitive economics. The European lacks the spiritual component. So when he produced economics, politics, and culture, it was exploitive. It was the destruction of humanity and of the value systems of which we call spiritual. And we have to understand that the Greeks tried to tap into the Africans, but they didn't have the spiritual component to make it work. And then they passed it on to the Romans, and they took it to another exploitive, materialistic level. But we can just introduce our people to some of this at this point. We really can't on these journeys. In the African tradition, you're not supposed to be miles and miles away. You're supposed to be right near each other. You're supposed to be, from mouth to ear. You're supposed to be from heart to heart. And so that's a whole, we're out of that, but we have to take as much as we can get.
Yeah.
The monsters are there taking their little secrets and trying to do something with it. But the good thing is they don't know what the hell they're doing. So we can, make sure we put our thing together. 50-year turning point of history, 1945 to 1995. I'll go into that a little more.
Okay.
But that's the time frame. And using the pyramidal triangle, because there's so much to learn, you cannot possibly expect it to come in these bits of TV exposure or video exposure.
Yeah.
So I came up with 3 50-year turning points of history. One was the period I refer to as the Queen Tea era, and that's BC.
Okay.
1400 BC to 1350 BC. That period of there was a rebirth and a renewal And so out of that came many things that we can study and we can realize how important they've been to the history of the world. But then that's the southern cradle. That's Shekanta Diop's northern cradle, southern cradle, that the great eras of African history in the Nile Valley and the areas around the Nile, particularly in the south, that comes from nurturing this spiritual component. But the northern cradle, the environment, as opposed to HAPI, the flow of the river and the relationship to the universe, etc., the northern cradle, people got caught up in the ice age.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people have saying, there he goes again with that ice age mess. But it's the reality. Africans lived in the ecology of the sun, and the humanity that emerged in Europe lived in the ice age. And when you're in the ice age, you've got to be in survival mode. And you got to find yourself a good cave so that you can have some protection. And so that northern cradle had that lack of spirituality and the lack of a view of the fullness of nature. And so we're not putting anybody down, but we're trying to put them in the right historical context of their relationship to the universe. And so,
well, you know, Dr. J, that's, you know, I'm sorry, you know, because you brought up something when you were talking about the Nile, and I just wanted to just ask a question about that. And maybe Professor Small, you can jump in here. Is there a direct relationship between the mystery systems of the Nile and secret societies of today?
You want me to jump in? I'm trying to jump out.
Yeah, you can jump in a little bit. Dr. jump back in.
Well, Professor Small jumped out of the picture, but he's back.
No,
he's back.
I'll help you. Take your finger, go up my nose like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Trace the light. What image do you see? From here to there. What do you see? Look at the light. Look at my face. What do you see?
I see you.
Look at my eyebrows just above the brow and down my nose. What image do you see? The light. What do you see?
A reflection.
It's a falcon.
It's the what?
Look at it. It's a bird. It's a falcon.
Oh, yes, yes. Okay.
You see, if you don't have eyes, you don't see.
Mm.
We'll leave that right there. But you wanted to know what the relationships. Let me just call off some of the names of the Western secret societies and societies of secret that evolved out of the Nile Valley. You know, so we have the Pythagorean Brotherhood. In the real early days, they had something coming out of Rome called the Eleusinian Mysteries. You have the Knights Templars. You have the Rosicrucian. You have the Freemasons. You have the what do you call it? The Illuminati. You have the Opus Dei. You have the Assassins. You have the Mafia. You have the Triads in China. You have the Skull and Bones. And so all of these organizations that different white ethnic nations used to organize their elite. And what they were hiding is the basic scientific understanding of how to develop and use economics, politics, and culture while they control it to build societies. Okay.
Okay.
And the basic scientific knowledges that undergird that, the mathematic knowledge, the linguistic knowledge, the medical knowledge, the psychological knowledge. Even today, with all of these med schools and stuff, and schools of psychology and schools of engineering, what the students are coming out with is old and peripheral information. The elite is at another level with the scientific knowledge, And they keep that between the few because that's how they control those who have skills. And they choose, I'll show you in the Black community, you got the what's the brother's name, Dr. Jeffries?
Knights Templar?
No, Asa belonged to them. The
Boule, the Sigma Pi Phi.
We got the Boule. But what the Boule does is feed off of Alpha Kappa Alpha, the Deltas, and the Black sororities and fraternities in the Black colleges. They pick the elite from among that group if they're skilled, trained, and tooled in the sciences and economics and politics, and pull them into the higher elite group. And then those are the people you see popping up as our judges. These are the people you see placed on cabinets and presidents' regimes or whatever we call these things. These are the people you see heading major corporations. These are the people you see in Black people I'm talking about in key places and banks. And that's just in the Black community. Well, the white community do the same thing. If you look at Skull and Bones, Yale University, look at how many of them have headed the CIA, have headed the Justice Department,
yes,
have become vice presidents or on the cabinets of presidents. Now, what does this all mean? It means that they have key people schooled and trained so that they could put them in key positions in society, so that they will protect and represent the interests of key bodies of families and the wealth that those families control. All right. So you have them at the top of military, you have them at the top of police departments, you have them at the top of FBIs, and these are the people determining the policy for the whole nation. So there's millions of people working in this pyramid. At the top of the pyramid is maybe at best 3,000 to 4,000 people running the lives of over nearly 300 million people for the interest of a few hundred people. You understand?
Yeah.
And so the secret society's primary purpose was to guard knowledge. And as Dr. Jeffries was explaining, in the African context, it was making sure that knowledge did not get in the hands of the ignorant or the unprepared or someone who was not ethically, morally skilled, trained, and planted. So whenever you join a secret society, all of the foundational steps was to teach you fundamental ethics, morals, and principles to transform your character so you'll be worthy and trustworthy of handling the higher knowledge that allow you to control society and to expand in the building of society.
So you know that, okay, so the societies that you're talking about, are there any currently in Africa, or are the ones that you
they're all over Africa.
We
call it here the craft. But every African society, let's go back. When we think of Africa, we think of all of these colonial states with their artificial borders. That's not Africa. That's the white man's Africa. But that's not the Africa of the traditional indigenous African. They have no borders. Okay. And so the schools of thought that the king of the Ashanti nation, the Asantehene, and the information that he guards and lives by is also the information that the king of the Zulu guards and lives by. Is also the information that the king of the Malian people or the Dogon people live by. They are guarding a body of knowledge. We've made the mistakes, and yes, we've left a lot of it out to the European world, and they've used it. If you look at the European Renaissance, it doesn't occur until after they get access to the African bodies of knowledge, which came from the invasion of the Muslims, the Turks, and the Arabs, who brought it into Europe. And then Europe explodes into this Renaissance because this new body of knowledge was available now for them to organize society for them to build, for them to structure their politics, structure their economic, structure their cultural barometers. And so they created a whole new Europe in record time. You know, part of that was enslaving us to do the heavy lifting, but they didn't just bring us to do the heavy lifting. They wanted our scientific minds. They were not agriculturalists. We were the agriculturalists in North America.
Yeah.
They were not artisans that could make bricks and architects that could build buildings. They had no historical experience of significance with that sort of thing. You know, how to cure food, how to preserve food. All of these things is why the African was captured physically, because he had a body of knowledge now that told him what you need to build a society that has stability, that has order, that offers protection, that could protect the health of the people, so forth and so on. So when we're talking about secrets, the secret is how to build what we call ma'at. That's what the secret is. The secret is how to build the God woman and the God man in terms of ethical, moral, and spiritual consciousness. Otherwise, you've got very dangerous people with a lot of technical skills, but they haven't risen above the level of animals. And that's what we see coming out of Europe. When they had their varied revolutions, you had the buffoons getting access to the information without having gone through transformation spiritually, ethically, and morally.
Exactly. They just couldn't. They can't handle it. They can't handle it.
Because they do not have the capacity to store spirit. Okay?
Wow. Wait. You got to say that one more time.
They do not have the capacity to contain, let's put it, say, to contain spirit. So they can do the intellectual thing. They can explain the hell out of something. They can tell you how it works, what's in it, but they cannot become the thing. See, the Africans don't have to do that explanation because we are the thing.
We are the thing. So now, okay, wait.
But just to put a nail on that coffin that Professor Small just laid out, the most progressive Europeans during the period of World War II were the Germans, who become the Nazis, who helped to put 100 million Europeans, not 6 million Jews, 100 million Europeans in the death process. They considered themselves superior. They were physically, but they were crassly inferior spiritually. And so that's why we got to read this history through our eyes and through our understanding. Otherwise, we'll miss it.
Right.
Yeah. So now, okay, Professor Small, can you just go back for a minute when you were talking about the Ivory Coast and just elaborate more on the Ivory Coast in terms of the secret societies or society of secrets?
Well, in Africa, we really do have secret societies. A secret society exists. They run the indigenous culture. Even with all of this mess, these colonial, fake democracy and parliamentary crap, Dr. Jeffries and I know that the real power lies at the end of the day with the indigenous leadership of Africa. They may not have the military, they may not have the killing technology that the Western Negroes have acquired. But at the end of the day, they make all of the final calls. No one's going to do anything in Ghana without consulting the Santahene. They're not going to do anything without consulting the Chimahene. They're not going to do anything without consulting the king of the Volta people, of the Ewe people. They're not going to do anything without going to the Western region and consulting the Junta king. So they understand that their barometers, even though they're trying to run Africa by these faulty Western political constructs and economic constructs, they understand that all of that can crumble into chaos if the indigenous people want it to happen. But the indigenous people understand that chaos will cause more harm and damage to their people. So there's a movement there, and I was on a webinar, Dr. J, that you were supposed to be on yesterday and couldn't get hooked up, and they were calling your name. Where's Dr. Leonard Jeffries?
I was trying to get in there.
The African Union sponsored that webinar. And one of the brothers, and I just dropped it, that this is about a cultural revolution. But there was one elder who was so beautiful. He laid it out so well, talking about the need for this indigenous revolution, this indigenous culture. He's a very big businessman in Nigeria. And he opened it up and says, I'm going to open this up with the clap. And I go like, where is he going with the clap? He says, to clap, you take two hands. So he says, the African on the continent is trying to clap with one hand. The African in the diaspora is trying to clap with one hand. No, you've got to have those hands together to clap.
Yes.
And what he was trying to outline was your thesis, Dr. J, on economic, politics, and culture. And that culture, at the core of the culture, is the spiritual system and is the central piece in producing the leadership of a nation. Our problem now, we have leaderships leading our country in countries in Africa. We have them in the Black Caucus and the City Council, but they don't have the African ethical moral foundation to guide their polity. And that's why we get such a mess like that Attorney General out in Louisville.
Yes.
He is totally void of an African spiritual consciousness. He may be a brilliant politician and one who can read and interpret the law, but without an ethical moral barometer to determine the way that gets interpreted and the moral expression you give to the people, you just become one of the criminals. Sounds good. Sounds like you intellectually sound. Just another empty vessel. And all you are is the vessel without content. And you know, Dr. Asa told us that all content must have intent. And all intent have content. And so he's void of that. He's just a vessel, a European vessel, and a nice suit and black face.
And married into the power structure of white folks, just like the Clarence Thomas sitting on the court. And the European American Southerners were anxious to have him on the court. Now, this didn't make any sense. Here are the most racist people glad to have him on the court, and he was standing holding hands with his blonde wife. So we have to look at these things and see that there is a serious understanding of the attack that's on our African peoples. But as Professor Small said when he was explaining, you have these modern would-be nations trying to be nations, but they're held together by a firm traditional structure. And it's not only the kings, but it's the paramount chiefs. It's not only the king and the paramount chief, but it's the linguist. It's the female power. You can look at the Ashanti, but you always know that there's a female power complementing the male power. So we have to look at, that's why I say we need to Africanize our lives. And that doesn't mean wearing something black or some beautiful earrings like you have. It means dealing with your heart and your mind. And then that reflects your being.
The secret society's primary job is to create leadership for society. And that leadership must take an oath. You know, when we took our oath, Dr. Jeffries and I, and certain things, we had to hold a sword to our heart and took that oath and said, if I violate this oath or betray this trust, I will plunge the sword into myself. And so when you understand that at the deep level, African culture says that the human being have the capacity to behave as divinity. And so secret society protects that body of knowledge that raised the human being's consciousness to that level of divine behavior, so that someone who's psychologically crippled, socially crippled, emotionally crippled, can't be in possession of that body of knowledge because they'll misuse it. So we see it in the Voodoo community, the Yoruba community, where people are saying, we're priests of these traditions, and folks say, oh, this one has done this to me. Oh, this one has hurt me. Oh, this one had did this thing to harm me. That's not what our tradition is about.
Yeah.
And anybody who would behave in that way have not gone through the appropriate process of initiation, step by step, so that you can grow with the spiritual integrity that prepares you to carry the weight of leadership.
Yes. In terms of the African societies, can you belong to those secret societies if you if you live in a Western civilization? Like if you're if you're Black folks in America, can you still be part of those secret societies?
Of course you can. America is a place, not a race.
Yeah.
Africa is a race. If you choose to submit to the transformation and the growth that the body of wisdom that has been preserved will put you through, so that you can understand that the more you learn, the greater servant you are to your people, and not that the people is a servant to you.
Yes.
You see? And that's what the body wisdom teaches. But it not only teaches enlightenment or give you certain kinds of power to tap into ancestral energy and to use the ancestral energy that is integrated in you to help you with the daily lives of the people, but you are a servant of the people. They're not to serve you. You're not a despot when you're a king in Africa. You're a servant.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yeah. I remember that's one of the first things when I was talking to you. That's the first. I mean, you said more than one time to me in terms of like you are a servant. You are a servant. You don't look up at me as this above everyone. I'm a servant. So.
And that's an important part. It's like if you look at the body of knowledge, the child is born, and there's two directions a society can take its children. You can take them to the direction of fundamental ignorance as regard real knowledge, and behavior then begins to grow around desires stimulated by emotion, which produce envy, which then give birth to jealousy, which then give birth to hatred, which then give birth to violence, which then give birth to death. Now that's one path, and that's basically the path that Euro education and intellectualism have led us. You can go on the path of Africanism, which says that you move the child towards spiritual knowledge, which leads to ethical, moral understanding, which allows the child to grow into exercising that energy as something we call wisdom. Wisdom is the appropriate exercising of knowledge. That leads to enlightenment. Enlightenment leads to the kind of spiritual leadership that a society desires. And so that's what the fight is about. Now, they know this in the white thing, but like I said, they don't have the capacity to contain the spirit. Even though they have our knowledge, a lot of our knowledge, and they mimic it and dressed in all kind of uniform and give all kinds of signs and symbols. When it comes to containing spirit, they don't have that capacity. And that's why you look and see when they wanted to go to outer space, it was no accident they hired those Black women in NASA. Okay?
Yeah.
They knew
the hidden contributors.
They knew they didn't have the capacity, and they knew the women did, but then they spent the whole thing trying to not let the women know who they really were doing what they were doing. In the end, it had to be known. When they wanted to advance to the level, it was a Black brother who worked for IBM. The racists in America would not let him do what he was there, the IBM elite brought him to do. So they send him to Europe, and he developed the desktop. It is an African man that developed the internet. It is a Black Indian man that developed the email. So what is it that the cell phone, a Black man? And so what is it that they have in their technical arsenal that we didn't give them, but they make us think that this is them having us do something that they taught us to do, when the truth is they have brought us into their scheme of things to do what only we can do.
And that's Brother Small, as I said, has spent a lifetime getting into this. And what we also found out was that the female component was very powerful spiritually, because the Ashanti king passed and there was a funeral ceremony for him. And we were on our way. We had a group of 30. We were on our way to go to the Akasambo Dam, because that was the big thing, this big industrial project that Nkrumah had completed. But a young fellow came to the gas station where we were gassing up, and he said, "Where are you all going?" We said, "To the dam." He said, "To the dam?" Mm-hmm. He said, "Forget the damn dam. You need to go into the palace." And we said, "Why?" He said, "They're having the ceremony. The king who was brought from the village and then he ruled, he's going back to the village." So this little kid read us. Here we are with the PhDs and all of this knowledge, and this little youngster read us. And so I had to put my, European training in place. So we'll split up. I'll take 15 of the group to the dam because we got an appointment. But then Rosalind will take 15 of them, following this young man into the palace area. And once they saw us coming into the palace area, now I'm not there, Rosalind is experiencing this. The chief priestess, the one who removes spiritual negative forces with her fly whisk, she saw these African Americans coming into this sacred ceremony, and she spiritually bonded with them, including Rosalind as the leader. And then she had her maiden come out and ask Rosalind to come out in the middle of the crowd. Now, these are the key people in the Ashanti Nation. And she had her fly whisk passed to Rosalind. And Rosalind, unfortunately, knows the culture, so she was able to dance with this great priestess. That linked us forever with them. See, we out in the West trying to make it in the European model, and the African model is still there. It's real. And so her children, when she connected with us, she sent her children to come to America for the education. One was a brilliant scientist, and he had a lovely wife. She didn't send them to other Ashanti people. She sent them to us. They stayed with us. So you have to see this spiritual connection is a heavy thing. And one manifestation of it for us to understand is Tony Browder has connected with the stones and the structures spiritually. He reads rocks and Tony is in a spiritual dimension. And he's not ego-oriented like the Europeans, so he's not beating back people. He's drawing people to him and then taking his little baby, his daughter there. So he has a daughter. That's a part of this phenomenon. So we have to tap into that and continue to move and try to remove the negative and put the spiritual component in the right place.
Yeah.
And what, when you learn the science, part of the Secret Society teaches the science of human anatomy. Everybody gives off light. Everybody gives off energy every day, all day. You give off different types of light at different times of the day. And your light and my light is constantly intersecting. That's why Dr. Jeffries said in starting out, when we have these kind of meetings, we need to be next to each other, looking at each other. But we're not only next to each other, looking at each other, the energy that's coming from us is also intersecting and communicating with each other. And when you learn to train that energy in a human being, and that's what African secret societies do, it train the energy that is you. So that energy can perform certain tasks. Because everybody don't do the same thing. You have certain tasks. And so that aura that people talk about, everyone have an aura. Most people, because they've never been trained, their aura is just a bundle of emotional impulsing and not an organized, directing energy that they can manage and control to influence the ecology they find themselves in. That's a part of what secret societies do and train. It's like I've been saying on some of the program that you, when you were born, when you were given birth to by your mother and your father, they were giving birth to themselves.
Yes.
Now, a lot of people say yes to that, but think of what that means. If your mother and your father, having given birth to you, gave birth to themselves, and they in turn was given birth to by them parents, your grandparents, who had giving birth to themselves, and they in turn was given birth to by your great parents, who had given birth to themselves, then who are you but all of your ancestors going forward? Further that, with the African explanation and understanding, the only way the divine, the totality of everything, the totality of creation can recreate human beings is that the human being is that aspect of God that creates. Think of it now. Don't just say yes. Think of what I just said. The human being, when they go through the process of sex, impregnation, and birth giving, the baby don't drop out of the sky. It isn't sneaked into the room at night. That is the divine itself. You are that aspect of the divine itself, recreating itself. And if you follow the line backwards, I'm giving y'all a lot in this, right? If you follow the line backwards from you through all your ancestors, you end up being God, having a human experience. You understand?
Yeah.
So what are we supposed to do? What is the body wisdom is supposed to do? Make us conscious of that so that we use the potential that we are to express the divine reality towards some sort of perfection. And that's the secret that they don't want the African to ever have, to know that they're God having a human experience called them.
Yeah, because once you understand that.
You know, so we've been reduced by the ignorance of Western stupidity and its false notion of intellectualism to think that we are mere things without understanding our attachment to the rest of the universe.
Yeah. So, okay, I gotta.
Well, you can be speechless, so just smile. In other words,
the only reason why I can talk a little bit is because I talk to Brother Smalls all the time. So this is not going over my head. But the first like 5 times he said this to me, I was just like, wait, what? I'm giving birth to who? Like, it took me a minute. That's the only reason why I can utter a couple of words out right now. But I want to go back because you talked about it a little bit, because you said how how these secrets that we have, that Europeans have used them to, and so does you, Dr. J, use them to, to further their advancement, right? So what are some, when we think about the transatlantic slave debauchery that happened, how did they use, their secrets to make that happen?
Remember, first of all, that's a not even a quarter second in time. 100 years. It doesn't measure in time, but because we're moving in the real time, it seems like an enormous amount of time. Why did they come to Africa? Why did they come? That Columbus' father worked with the Portuguese to build a trading post that became the first slave dungeon in Africa, Elmina. There's a young man that they took back to Europe with him from Elmina, who was a part of the royal family. That young man was the navigator on the ship that brought Columbus here. It was his body of knowledge from his ancestors who traveled back and forth to America all the time and everybody wanted to deny that Africans came and go. And they create this myth of coming across the Pacific Ocean. Who would take that long route from the Pacific Ocean when you can damn near swim from Ghana to Brazil?
Yeah.
It's just such an insult to the psyche of human beings that someone would even try to deny that reality. But when they realized what they had found in the Americas, and Europe had never built a civilization, what then is the next thing you do? Go get the civilization builders and bring them to build a new civilization. And that's what they did. But then now they have to make the civilizers and the civilization builders think, oh, you were just a bunch of ignorant buffoons and we needed your labor. When what they needed was your civilization building skills.
Yeah.
Look at the fight we've had in America. Every one of the laws that represent ethical, moral, principled behavior in the Code of Laws in the US Constitution, we fought to put it there. But they didn't have the capability or capacity to include the humanity into the Constitution. So we had to wage war against them to put the humanity in the Constitution of the United States, 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments, and even other things before that and since then.
In fact, the founding fathers of the nation had taken the step of embracing the concept of the secret society.
Mm-hmm.
They were all Masons.
Yes.
And so, and the victory that involved France and England fighting each other for who's going to control this new system of insanity and enslavement, the victory was given to the Americans through the French Masonic connection.
And by the
French fleet was brought.
Agent is that.
That's right. So we have to go deep into the history that we're not given, and the European really doesn't want to give it because, just as Professor Smalls was saying, he had a period in which he couldn't take care of his basic health. You had what they call the Dark Ages, not for a day or two or a week or a couple of years, hundreds of years is the European Dark Ages, and they didn't come out of it until they had contact with people that are our background. And that light came from us that they were able to use, but because they have this war mentality, this greed, this lack of spirituality, they have instituted a series of war. As we saw Columbus didn't come when he sailed on the ocean. He was prepared with military. He met people who greeted him. He said, this is ridiculous. These people are so friendly, the native peoples. He said, they ain't interested in no war. They don't know what war is. We can take them. And they did. And Columbus initiated the process of millions and millions and millions of native indigenous people that were destroyed. And we don't have a history in our history books about them. It's a sidebar on what happened to the tens of millions of native peoples met by these Europeans. Africans were able to survive, and because they had enough of their thing intact. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't a struggle. In fact, I have in my hands, because if you're supposed to be a professor, you're supposed to have at least a book or two.
Yeah.
This was the book that I edited on South Africa in Crisis.
Okay.
And Dr. Clark put a demand on me. He said, we cannot wait another 20 years for the Cheikh Anta Diop book, Civilization and Barbarism, to be put on the world stage. You have to take a sabbatical leave and go away to Europe and translate the book. And so I couldn't do it in 80 because we had a whole lot of stuff going on, including international conferences. I couldn't do it in 81. We were doing, and then 82. I finally went in 83. And in 83, while I was there trying to translate this enormous book, Civilization and Barbarism, from French to English, it was too deep for me. I got 40 or 50 books on science, that first 100 pages. He's speaking to the scientists of the world, the whole tradition of European science. He's not speaking to a political historian, a political scientist or historian like myself, but I still tried. And it was frustrating, and I have a tendency to open my mouth when I see something wrong. And I was with the World Council of Churches, and I told them that the churches are not doing enough for the struggle in South Africa. And so the head of the World Council of Churches was a partner of my deputy chair, Professor Scobie, this Dr. Filippati. He said, Dr. Jeffries, if you think we're doing enough for the struggle in South Africa, I'll put you in charge of a task force to help the world churches deliver. And I was so glad. I didn't know what to do because I could take the DF book I was sinking and put it on the shelf and get involved in the real day-to-day going on in South Africa. And that's when I found out that the key to the white folks' struggle in South Africa was they had a secret society called the Broederbond. Oh. And it was that secret society of the Broederbonds that was sustaining them. They formed it to fight not the Africans, they formed it to fight the British. Control over the wealth in the southern part of Africa has been between the Dutch and the British. And they formed a secret society because the British culture was absorbed with these things. Oxford, Cambridge, all those are places where these secret societies have their base. And so the Dutch formed the Broederbond to fight the English. But then when Black folks began to wake up, they had to use the Broederbond to fight the Africans. They had a double struggle. They had to fight the British because they wanted to control this wealth of South Africa, and they had to fight the Africans. And so fortunately, Africans began to tap into their cultural and secret societies. And they formed their understanding of struggle around that. One of the key persons, we give a due respect to Nelson Mandela, but he was in jail for 20-something years. Yeah. The fight had to be led by others. And one of the youngsters who was the key to the fight was Steve Biko.
Yes.
So Steve Biko left the struggle with a powerful formulation that the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. And so he didn't organize men, he organized the children. So if you understand the secrets of South African struggle, it's the children and the women. The men were decimated. The men were run out of the country. The men were in terrible, but the children and the women were the key to the resistance. The women refused to have their homes wiped out. They had what they call the black spot theory of removing Black people from their lands, the black dot. But these women got so clear on what they needed to do. Their Black men who worked with the South Africans would report to them when they were coming to wipe out an African village and the so-called black spot. And they would tell the women, so the women would take down the village before the bulldozers came. And there wasn't anything for them to do but to roll over the land. Then when the bulldozers left after a few days, the women took and rebuilt the village. They took the materials and whatnot. So the struggle between the children and the women is key to South Africa, not Nelson Mandela.
Yeah. The
children's power and the women's power has to be put and understood as what was the key there. So, you can't do but so much on the air like this, but at least we can plant some seeds that we need to go deep.
Right.
And,
So if you look at history, and that's why Dr. Noble says, study African history, whether it's in the Americas or on the continent, because it will erase the white mystery.
Yes.
If you don't know history, you're stuck with the white mystery. And he says, once you erase the white mystery, you can work the Black miracle. But you got to study history.
Got to study
the white mystery. And that's very important to understand, because you see some key things. When the Berlin Conference jumps off, 1835? That's the
1885.
85, I'm sorry. The brother who leads one of the first major resistance there's actually two going at the same time, but it's Menelik in Ethiopia
Ethiopia. Yes.
against the Italian. But if you studied in history, Menelik hooks up with all of the ethnic groups that make up the Aksum Ethiopian Empire. The specific spiritual families was leading those different parts of his army. That was their secret society.
Yeah.
The only thing we made a mistake, we let our humanity spare the Italians once we drove them into Eritrea when he could have crushed them and taken the whole horn. And we didn't do it. And just a few years later, you shift to the Sudan, where the British and the Turks and the Arabs come to invade. And you have another spiritual leader. He's Muslim, but he's dealing with that Sudanic indigenous understanding of Islam. And his name is Muhammad Ahmed.
Mahdi.
And one day, the Mahdi, and one day the British sent 30,000 troops, Arabs and Turks. He went, and they had guns, recalling rifle. The Mahdi had spears and arrows, and they only sent 3,000 back alive. They took the rest out. History don't tell us that. Or we go down to South Africa, and the British had already landed. Robespierre is the head of government in England. And there was an incident where a chief had some disagreement with a couple of his wives, a junior chief. And they ran away to the white military camp. And he goes and says, oh, I want my wives to come home. The white folks said no. So he wipes them out and he takes his wives. So then the British send their military to the king, whose name was Setuweya. And they said, we want you to give us that chief so we can punish them. And the king of the Zulu said, no way, Jose. So the British came to attack them at a place called Islambada. And Setuweya killed 2,000 of them in one day and caused the fall of the Robespierre government in England. But the white folks says, you let them, you know what, kill our children. And that toppled the Robespierre government. They'll tell us about Robespierre and the government falling, but they won't tell you it fell because of the Battle of Islambada and the destruction of the British forces by the king of the Zulu, Setuweya. So, and I just lay that out to show you, because each of these spiritual leaders were part of the indigenous secret society, and so were their sub-chiefs and their generals. And these people with no significant modern military weapon almost decimated the invasion after the Berlin Conference into Africa. And so we have heroes that are just so enormous for us to mimic. And that's why history will erase the white man mystery and allow you to work your Black African miracle.
Yes. So who was Prince Hall? Like, who was Prince Hall?
There's a lot of myth about Prince Hall being a Black man who had some white parentage from Barbados, but that's not true, and it's never been true. A white man wrote that in the history, when he was trying to write the history of Prince Hall. There's no facts to support Prince Hall coming from Barbados. There was two Prince Halls that was known, and both was born in Boston, Massachusetts. And Prince Hall became the founder of what we call the Prince Hall Masons today. But in its original manifestation, it was called the Free African Lodge. They fought in the British Army against the Americans. But when the war was over, they fought in an Irish brigade. And that Irish brigade introduced them to Freemasonry coming out of the British school of thought. And when the war was over, the Irish wanted them to, okay, come go with us, back to Ireland. And he was one of the first written piece where we learn where a Black man says, as long as my people are not free, I'm not free. And they didn't abandon us. Those men who was with Prince Hall in that first lodge decided we will stay back and fight for the freedom of our people. And so they then tried to carry on their lodge with the white American lodges, who rejected them and said, you all can meet, but you can't bring anybody in, you can't organize anybody else, you can't train anybody. And so they appealed to England and got their own charter. No white lodge in America, Grand Lodge or other, can show an original charter from England. Only the lodge in Boston, which is still known as the Free African Lodge, can show a charter of dispensation to operate as a Freemason in the United States of America. And that is now the Prince Hall Lodge. And it got named Prince Hall by Richard Allen. At least Richard Allen proposed it, because Richard Allen and Absalom Jones, who founded the AME Church and so forth, they were also part of Freemasonry. Wow. If you go through the history, Prince Hall Masonry, if you go through the history from the 1700s to Martin Luther King, every significant Black leader, from David Walker to Fred Douglass, was a Prince Hall Mason, from Adam Powell to Leonard Jeffries, and myself included.
And my family on both sides. My mother's father was born January the 19th, 1888. I was born on his birthday, on 1937. But Papa was a Mason. He was a Booker T. Washingtonite, put your buckets down where you are and build. He was a Du Boisite, because Du Bois had done a study of Farmville, Virginia, which was the county seat in that area. And he was a Garveyite and a Mason. So here are people coming up out of the South equipped to put some strength in us. And so my mother was Eastern Star. So that they had their farms and their land in Virginia, but they had their institutions. On my father's side, and we didn't know much about him, but then when I did study with Alex Haley, and circumstance forced me to call up to Aunt Bessie to find out what was happening, because the white folks said, we bought this history called Roots. And Dr. Jeffries, we're glad you're here to help us out. House, they created a cutaway of a boat, and Lou Gossett and myself and others are all watching this scene. And it was really a realistic scene of a slave ship. And O.J. Simpson, he was the guider of the youth, and he's calling on the upper deck down to the lower deck to Kunta Kinte. He's moaning and groaning. He said, Kunta Kinte, you got to eat, you got to be strong. We have to fight the white man. And this was a high emotional thing. All of us men were over in the corner watching it. And then Green, the Englishman who was handling the African part of Roots, ran and said, cut this out. We got to cut this out. We said, what? He said, we don't want to have return to Mother Africa, kill the white man and return to Mother Africa. So after that, I said I had to leave and call up to my Aunt Bessie, because Spirit said, go to your grandfather's grave. I've been to Georgia, but they didn't let me go to South Georgia because they couldn't trust us city boys. So we could go to Atlanta. When we were in Virginia, they took us right to the farm, and we had all this land. But so here I am trying to, Spirit saying, go to your grandfather's grave. I said, I don't know nothing about a grandfather in Georgia. And so I called up to Aunt Bessie, and she said, your grandfather is, no, she said, we come from Ohio. I said, Aunt Bessie, we ain't come from Ohio. We migrated from Georgia to Ohio. Where is your father? And she got my drift, and she said, your grandfather, my father, is buried in Midway Church Cemetery, Jasper County, Kelly, Georgia. And I left Alex, went to Atlanta, rented a car, and went to Southern Georgia for the first time in my life by myself. And by the time I got there, the sun was setting. So I turned the car lights on, and I went into the cemetery. Here I am by myself in the cemetery, worried about snakes. It got me a stick to deal with snakes. Now, that's a city boy. A stick ain't gonna do nothing to no snake. I should have been worried about the ticks. But I turned the lights on and went into the cemetery. The tallest tombstone in the cemetery is Jesse Jeffries, born in 1868, August the 10th, and died July the 16th, 1917. I later learned he was murdered by the Klan. Why? Not because he was looking at any white women. He had a family. He had 13 kids. He wasn't worried about no white women. and he had land, etc. But he was murdered because he was a leader. He was the head of the Masons. His tombstone has the twin pillars of Masonry, and it is designed as an obelisk. From that point on, my life was changed. In the dark, in the woods in Georgia, my life was changed, and I vowed to fight to the death.
Yeah.
These white folks and crazy Negroes to get that truth of that history out there.
Yeah.
And so our journey is real, and we have to make it real. It ain't a plaything. It's real.
Right. And let me just tell you some for those who, I know our time is coming, but if you go to Brazil and you deal with the Candomblé community, the indigenous African religion, what you see on the surface with the dress and the clothing and the dancing, that's one thing. But what operates behind it is the African secret society. If you go to Cuba and you're dealing with Lucomi, what you see on the surface of Lucomi is one thing, but it is the secret society of the males and the females that have kept the Lucomi alive, kept the indigenous spiritual system alive, and that's how we survive. If you go to Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic, the Santeria and Boqueria, what you see, what you don't see is the African secret society. If you go to South Carolina and Georgia and Florida, and you see the hoodoo and the root, today that secret society still lives in the southern part of the United States, and many of it has moved into the northern and the Midwestern part of the United States. But because we don't know our history, we're stuck in the white man's mystery, which blinds us to the African retention that has kept us alive in America.
Mm. So, you know,
and Philly, let me just put this in. And my wife's parents come from South Carolina, not coastal South Carolina like James, it's in the Georgetown area, but they come from the Sumter area, Camden and Sumter. But again, we were able to put traditions in place to continue our struggle. Her father, hardworking man, was a Mason. He was so proud. He bought this Impala car, powder blue, had his Masonic symbols on it, and didn't drive it that much. But eventually, he gave it to Rosalind and me, and we took that sucker to California because it had spiritual power in it.
Yeah.
So that's the type of things we have to understand. We don't stand alone. We stand with some powerful forces, male and female, ancestral.
And may I say to my young brothers and sisters who I see on the internet, don't confuse white Freemasonry with the Free African Lodge, which is Prince Hall Freemasonry. We know something else, we learn something else, and we do something else. Yes, backwards intellectualism have caused a lot of deterioration in the Prince Hall movement structure. But even that has not weakened it as much as you may think. And so the studying of our history will erase the white man's mystery and allow us to create our Black African miracle. So just that little ditty should keep your head straight.
Yeah, you need to keep saying it. But okay, when you're speaking about the Masonic lodges, can you just elaborate on the Scottish Rites Masonic Lounge?
Well, when you're in these things, there are things you cannot collaborate on.
Okay.
Take an oath. But you can study. The information is all over the bookstores. So Freemasonry is not a secret society. It is a society of secrets. And so you can find books on the Scottish Rite. The Scottish Rites is the manifestation of certain rituals and certain bodies of information that was developed in the lodge in Scotland. And then you have the York Rites, which is a little more European whiteness in England. That's more the Anglo-Saxon. And so you have to learn both of those, the Scottish Rites and New York writes, again, these are bodies of knowledge, rituals, signs and symbols that you get in and to get out and to get in access to information. But it's all about bodies of information. At each step, at each degree, you get more information on how to reconstruct your character so that you become a better human being.
And what's
going on there?
Yeah. So you mentioned this before, the Black Boulets. So how significant are the Black Boulets in American culture?
You want to speak to that, Dr. J?
Yeah, just we can't put but so much for you and your audience today because you'll choke to death on all of this good stuff.
We're already choked.
And you won't have a chance to chew it and swallow it.
Yeah. No, we have to rewatch this.
But at the 1900s, the beginning of the 1900s, Black folks had fought in the Civil War, had helped to save the nation, and they were supposed to be in Reconstruction aid to help Black folks get land, build their institutions. But white folks, true to themselves, they turned their back on us, and we did not get that. Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896 meant that separate was equal. And so what we thought we were fighting for, integration into American society, they let us know it ain't happening. So in the early 1900s, Black folk began to form their own. W.E.B. Du Bois took people to Niagara Falls, and you had a movement there. At the same time, even across the world, the ANC was being formed in 1913. And in 1908, the NAACP. And at that same time, that's when the Divine Nine began to establish itself, which eventually was 5 of the fraternities and 4 of the sororities, because they gave us a chance to develop leadership committed to us. And that was the key. And so,
when you finish that,
yeah. But one of the things I wanted to add to that was there are 5,000. Well, in other words, there are so many thousands of these brothers that are committed to a fraternal relationship and the sisters to sorority. If they turn that past the rituals into struggle and Africanize it, there's a powerful force in America to move us to the goals that we have to achieve. And we need it now in this age of that man in the White House. Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah. All of that he just mentioned evolved out of Prince Hall Masonry.
Okay.
All of those rituals and stuff, they did some sidebar things with some Greek names and rituals and stuff, but the leadership that evolved, much of what became our sororities and our fraternities, started as Prince Hall Masons. And you'll see that the leadership that became the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, everyone talks about the Garvey connection, but nobody talks about the Masonic connection, the Prince Hall Mason, not white Masonry. And when we talk about Noble Drew Ali and the Moorish Science Temple, nobody talks about the Prince Hall Masonry, because that's where Drew Ali came from. So a lot of the movement that even evolved into the nationalist movement had its foundation with these people. David Walker certainly would not be called no punk, all right?
Mm-hmm. Revolutionary.
Right. Richard Allen, Epsilon Jones, and so many others through time, Fred Douglass. Dr. Jeffries mentioned Du Bois and them starting the Niagara movement. That evolved out of the Afro-American League, founded by some Black women and a guy named T. Thomas Paustin in 1892. Long before Malcolm X talked about Afro-American, they had formed the Afro-American League, and that morphed into the Niagara movement, you see. So there's so much in our history that will let us see the societies of secrets and the secret societies that we bought and maintain here to sustain and keep us till this day, you see. And we can trace this right back to ancient Kemet, right back to Nile Valley, right back to the Happy River, and see that the priesthood that oversaw the ethical, moral training of the leadership of Nile Valley, the civilization that evolved out of the Happy River, has come right down to the root woman in South Carolina, and the voodoo priest in Haiti, and the Masonic Lodge in Detroit, and the Sora in Georgia. You can connect all of them up.
And white folks were attempting to gird themselves to build their society, and they did not reach just into the Catholic Church with its secret societies, but they set up the Rosicrucian movement. And the Rosicrucian movement, the base of it was in San Jose, where I went to set up the Black Studies Department. People around the world thought I went there because I was a Rosicrucian. And actually, we did have a relationship with the Rosicrucians, but it was white folks trying to take on the characteristics and the processes of Black folk, but they had to admit its relationship to the Nile. So the Rosicrucian movement relates to the Pharaoh Akhenaten, who helped and his period of time with his great mother, Queen T or Tai, and his father, Amenhotep III, to renew the cultures in the Nile. Well, and so the Rosicrucian is one of those movements you do not see, but it's everywhere in Africa. In fact, James, I got a shock when found out that 3 members of my staff coming from Africa were Rosicrucians, Professor Bachue, Professor Amoda, and one of the professors from East Africa. They were in the Rosicrucian movement. And then come to find out that President Ufot-Boigny of the Ivory Coast used the Rosicrucian movement to help formulate a developmental policy in the Ivory Coast. And it spread to other parts of Africa. So there's a lot that we need to learn about. And that's
well, I got your book. You thought I lost
why this HAPI process is so, because yes, yes, and that's about that's 1,000 pages.
All pages.
1,000 pages.
James,
you remember
that's book? I remember it. I said if anybody needs it, James Small needs this book. That's one of the books that deals with societies.
5 years now or longer.
Yes.
It's the secret teachings of all ages, and it has all of the Western secret societies in it.
Wow.
And so it's by Manly P. Hall, who was a big wiggy dig in Western white Masonry.
That's right.
But it has the Rosicrucian and has every one of them in here. And then if people want to just research and popular culture media, I think this is Time Life book. It was a special issue, and it was put out on the 4/26/19 on the history of secret societies.
Oh,
so you can order it through Time magazine.
When was that? What year was that?
2019.
Oh, last year. Okay.
2019. And then this is another one that Life magazine put out, The Hidden World of Secret Societies. This was done 6/19 in 2015. So you can get this through Life magazine, but there's a lot of the books on secret societies you can buy and learn the basics of them. But the essence of them is to understand what they're about. It is about controlling the body of knowledge that allow you to rise to the level where you are in charge of the social order that's created. That you have the mental construct in partnership with other men and women, so that no matter how intellectually sharp all the guys and the girls with the PhD is, there's a group above them with a higher body of knowledge that manipulates and uses them to build and run society for them.
Yeah.
Best way to say it.
Yeah. So I saw a couple people like ask this question in the chat. So the Greek fraternities, should we be encouraging our children to be members of Greek fraternities and sororities?
Yes, but with an African consciousness going in.
Mm.
Each one of those fraternities they are also secret societies or societies of secret. For every one of the symbols you see facing you, there is a Kemetic symbol on the other side of it that is not facing you. And you will only get to know about when you become a part of it. But if you teach African history to your children, because those organizations, think of the Deltas. We may look at them and laugh and say they're just a bunch of cute little sisters dressing up and being pretty and being fancy. But do you know how many hospitals they've built in Africa? How many clinics they've built in Africa? Yeah. How much housing they've built in Africa? How much wells they've built in Africa? Most people have no idea, and yet they've done an enormous work over quite a period of time. And when we look at AKA and see the kinds of things they've done in the Black community for orphans in this country, for poor girls in this country, and on, we need to study the work and then bring an African consciousness to raise that work to a higher level. But don't dismantle the car. Don't take the wheels off of it and push it over the cliff when all you have is your bare feet, just because the car is painted pink. You know, utilize the vehicle to do what it was designed to do.
So if all the things, go ahead.
No, and I'm glad James raised this about these women, and they are talented and they have a dignity. One powerful woman, Bertha Roddy Maxwell, she was the head of the Deltas, but she also was involved in the struggle when there was a struggle between various members of the National Black Studies movement. She called us together in Charlotte, where she was having a conference of the social scientists. And she sat us down to work out the conflicts. And that was a conflict that involved Ivan Van Sertima, Professor, and Dr. Finch. And she made sure that we didn't go into destruction, self-destruction, and war. And what was agreed was that the people in Atlanta, you remember that, James, and Mother Keffa was there, and they was cussing and carrying on, losing it. But we agreed, based with her presiding, to have the conference in Atlanta in September, and then we would have our conference in California, organized by Milana Carrega and others, in February. And so we had two branches of the family agreeing to not to destroy each other, but to have separate conferences. And eventually we came back together again, because one of the persons who has the biggest heart, the biggest consciousness and spirituality, the biggest historical record is Dr. Asa Hilliard. He was the best of the best.
Yeah.
And so Asa was able to heal the conflicts that we had with Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, Milana Carrega, myself, and others, Jacob Carruthers and whatnot, and then Van Sertima and whatnot. We did not let that become destructive.
And Asa was Boulay.
And yes, and he was Boulay. They went out and recruited him. They begged him to bring your spirituality to help enhance us. And when they had this celebration, they had a 2-day celebration of the brother's life. And part of it was Safisha, Donna Lee's wife. They had the period which you call a wake. It was at the King Chapel. And there was 100 people there. And we wondered, where are these 100 people coming from? There were 100 people from Liberia who were there to testify that Asa had spent 6 years in Liberia and restructured the school system in Liberia. And he never went pounding his chest that I spent 6 years. It was the same time that Rosa and I was running around doing our things in Africa. But it was just part of what he did. And the beautiful thing was Don Ali and his wife, Safisha, Dr. Safisha, they had the people coming up to speak. And Asa was light and bright. But here comes this dark sister up to the podium, and she wanted to speak. And she said, she was introduced as a friend of Asa. And she got to that mic and said, I am a friend of Asa. In fact, I'm his youngest sister. Our mouths dropped. And then when she told us that she was born not to live for any length of time, Asa took his manhood and consciousness and brought her back to life. And she is so proud of her brother that she got her degree. She got her PhD. He was there, and she got it at the same time that her son got his PhD.
Wow.
So these things you can't even make up. But that's Asa. And then there was a group of 50 or 60 men sitting quietly on the side. That was the boule. They was in great respect. And then James, wasn't you and Wade and had the opening of the mouth ceremony?
But no, his son, because remember, I was in Ghana and couldn't make the funeral. You know?
Oh, yes. Okay, yes. So
I went up to Egypt by myself in the middle of the night with a couple of guys and a couple of Ghanaians, and we went by donkey and camels in the desert. I was able to find a 6-pack of Heineken and poured a beer libation to Asa at midnight at the pyramids.
Well, it was fantastic. Here was this sister. She said, he is a friend of mine, but he is my brother. And so Asa had these qualities because his mother was an evangelist. She was in St. Louis. She was so powerful. She'd go into the big church. The preacher would stop and say, Sister Minnie has arrived. We can get serious now.
Wow.
And Asa saved the day because we were all banned in Atlanta. They banned the great mathematician, Shabazz. They banned Lenny X, and it was Naim Akbar. They banned Dr. Ben. They banned Dr. Clark. They banned Dr. Len. I was banned from Atlanta, from Morehouse. But Asa, with his power and just his dignity and the way he handles things, he took all of that for us. And we were able to come together as a family. So the story has not been told, and it needs to be told and written on the powerful forces we use to sustain what we have. Now, I'm sitting there with the president of Morehouse. He's a new president, young guy. And I'm seeing these 50 men over on the side very quietly. But then when we did our ceremonies, the opening of the mouth and all the stuff that we did, then these 50 or so men, they asked them to stand. That was the boule.
Yeah.
The president of Morehouse, we were so anxious to stand, he almost knocked me off my seat, jumping up. And then, of course, they had a special ceremony for Asa. So the linkages that we've developed that have an African root and that have helped us in this enormous struggle against the monster of white supremacy and Arab ignorance and the rest of it, we need to put that together and solidify it as we go forth to do our job.
Secret societies are alive and well. They may be fractured. They may be dented. They may be broken in places. But if we go back to our history, we'll learn to repair them. If we go back to our indigenous spiritual system, we'll learn to restore them. And that's what the young generations have to do. You don't have to build a new spaceship. You have to take the one and beat the dents out of the one we have.
Yeah.
And learn to utilize it with an African ethical, moral, spiritual principle foundation. But we've already built the spaceships. You understand?
Yes.
That's what the secret societies, the sororities, and the fraternities are. But let's Africanize them now. We got the vehicle. Let's make them African tanks, African boats, African ships, African cars, so that it will carry us and our body of wisdom to the places where we have to reconstruct and rebuild our character, so we can reconstruct and rebuild our family, and reconstruct and rebuild our neighborhoods, and reconstruct and rebuild our community, and then reconstruct and rebuild the African nation, which is the civilization again.
And clearly, Black lives matter. But if you cannot and you do not have the sense to Africanize those Black lives, they're not going to matter but so much. There's going to be a lot of confusion. But if you Africanize it, it puts you in a direction that the Creator created, that has us finding a deity within us that are part of the larger consciousness of godliness. Now, our brother, Dr. Clark, he wasn't much for the churches. Dr. Ben, he looked to Ethiopia, but Dr. Clark left us, and I wouldn't want to leave you without this. Was one of his greatest works. He produced many, 20,000 books, and his name was sent to the library in Atlanta. So this poor boy up from Union Springs, Alabama, and Columbus, Georgia, who could not get into a library. He couldn't use the library. He had to forge the name of a white man that he worked with. He was able to donate to that complex in Atlanta with all those schools, Spelman, the women's schools, Morehouse, Atlanta U, the graduate school, and the theological seminaries. He was able to donate 20,000 books to the library. And this is one of his greats. And it says, Africans at the Crossroads, Notes for an African World Revolution. And he's talking about the unfinished revolution of Malcolm, the unfinished revolution of Nkrumah, the unfinished revolution of Haile Selassie, the unfinished revolution of Kamaboya. And so we got a lot of work to do. And you can't do it without this African foundation that we've been trying to say is a key to us empowering ourselves. So we don't have to wait for white folks. We've been waiting too long for white folks. It's time for us to move with an agenda, a global Black agenda, and that's Pan-Africanism. And so my life, I like to look at as having been, and with the people around me, having been a Pan-African journey, traveling through time, healing troubled African waters. And HAPI has come to link it all together.
Yes.
So that HAPI, the Nile River, represents what I call the 6 river systems on the African continent. And that's the Nile, as well as the Zambezi, as well as the Limpopo, as well as the Niger. And so when we see around these great river systems, we see how Africans built and made their contribution to civilization and culture. And we can't accept that we were in darkness until a white man brought the light. We created the light and made it a part of the human family's survival. So brothers and sisters, tap into this knowledge. Don't be afraid to buy a book. And if you can't buy a book, get a tape. And there's a lot of effort has gone into the family around HAPI to produce something special for you. You can't get it at Yale. You can't get it at Columbia. You can't get it at Harvard. You may not get it the way you should at Morehouse because everybody's trying to imitate white folks and Oxford and Cambridge. And so the Africans were the first to put higher education on the agenda of the human family and sustain it for thousands of years. And so we need to be a part of that movement through time. You can plug your wagon up to Trump if you want, and you'll be going ass backwards. You plug it up to these Africans, and you'll be going into this super highway, into the high tech of the future. Okay, now.
Yeah.
Okay, now.
I'm gonna say, Trump is the capstone of a pyramid that runs America. But you got to remove the capstone to dismantle the pyramids.
For the collapse to take place. So right. You're right. So we got to get out there to vote and every other thing we can.
Right. Because the pyramids are made up of thousands of people, starting with his cabinets and their appointees, the managers and the directors that set the policy for this nation. It's about 3,000 to 4,000 people that came in with Trump. In order to have them move out, you've got to move out Trump. And it'll give us a chance to help the Democrats reconstruct the next pyramid. We can't just elect them and say, y'all do it. We're going to have to say, we want this person there. We want this person there.
That's right.
But we have a chance to reconstruct the pyramid that sets the policy and run the country, because it isn't the president. He reads the script.
That's right. So we have to have a Black agenda. Amos Wilson set the stage. He produced a book of hundreds of pages called Blueprint for Black Power. We need a blueprint for African empowerment now and in the future. And so that's where we're going. This HAPI thing has a bigger role than you can imagine. And so I hope the people listening can support it, because how much sacrifice you and others have made, they don't understand this. You got Black people are not poor, but they have more than $1 trillion and heading toward $1.5 trillion of disposable income.
And on the continent, they got 3+ trillion.
That's right. And so when we put that together, we on our way.
We're bigger than China. We're bigger than America. We're bigger than Europe. And one of the elders said this yesterday. We're nearly 1.3 billion people. We got a bigger landmass than China. We got more Black people than Chinese. We don't know how powerful we are because we are fractured and shattered. And now the story of HAPI, which is a story of the unity of all the tributaries from across Africa becoming the oneness that becomes the HAPI. So I would like to recommend, and I couldn't find my copy, it's around here, but everyone go to Stolen Legacy by George G.M. James.
Yes.
Read The Stolen Legacy. Let HAPI lead you there. And then there's another book I want to show you. It's called The Secret Books of the Egyptian Gnostics, right?
Okay.
This book will let you see the transition from our Egyptian or Kemetic indigenous system into what we know as Christianity today. The Secret Books of the Egyptian Gnostics. And you will be surprised how much of our information they've been playing with. They just don't know what to do with it. But HAPI represents transformation of the environment and ecology. And symbolically, it represents transformation of the human psyche and the human personality. So please support the HAPI movement. Watch the HAPI document. Buy it. Give it as gift to your friends and families. You know, invite people over to your house, your friends and groups, and watch it as it's being presented. I think it's on the 3rd of October.
Yep. October 3rd at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And, you know, it goes back, and just to reiterate some of the things that that I talked about in the beginning, and, you know, you guys, both of you so eloquently talked about having an African mind. And so, you know, part of the HAPI movement, you know, when we talk about supporting Black businesses, we talk about becoming, you know, understanding your money, but we also talk about teaching the youth the truth. But going back to this cooperative economics piece, so everything is reciprocity. And one of the things that we're doing, because let's talk about, you know, I think a lot of times when people are talking, they're just saying, well, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, but they're not saying what they're doing. So what we're doing over here is we're definitely trying to get this information out. And a lot of what these two elders talked about this evening is in the HAPI document. I mean, in the HAPI documentary. But also, you know, we have a newsletter that we put out every month. And in this newsletter, we talk about, we have an economic innovator that we talk about from, you know, back in the day, 1800s, early 1900s. And we talk about how this economic innovator got us to where we are now. But then we also highlight a Black business, and sometimes one or two, depending on, you know, what information, you know, we were able to get. But we don't charge for that. We don't go to business and say, oh, give us money and we'll put you in here. This is something we're doing because we believe that if we are the example, then when you're looking at it, then you'll become the example. And that's very important in terms of this cooperative economics and this reciprocity. And we also have the youth. We have 2 young people. Shout out to Dane Days and Mackie Bradford, my son and one of my really good friends' son. These 2 gentlemen, every month, you know, we hound them for their articles, but they write articles in this HAPI newsletter about health. We also, you know, have like HAPI updates, but I'm seeing in the comments, people are talking about, you know, these elders, they need to have a curriculum and this is and that. Well, you know,
the curriculum are out there. We don't need to get them.
Exactly.
Dr. Jeffries got beat up on because he created the premier Black curriculum in the country, which they call the curriculum of inclusion. That's what they call it, but it's a curricula. Even in Stolen Legacy, there's a curricula. Asa Hilliard has created, and read his books. They're curriculas. The curricula is not for us to do. This is your job.
Yes. I was like, you guys have done enough.
You write the curricula.
Yeah.
And we weren't hired by you to carry the Black burden. You've got the same responsibility to carry this burden as we do.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, and this goes back to what you were saying. You were saying that, it's very easy for us to, say, oh, I support this, or we wear a T-shirt that says, I support this, or, we have, a picture of Africa on us, but to be able to live in that and to do the work. And
all of us have the same responsibility towards freedom.
Yes.
Dr. Asa Hilliard said, freedom is being shackled to your Black identity. Every one of us, that we got enough skilled people now, write the curricula. The books are there. Dr. Clark, Dr. Ben, Dr. Hilliard, Dr. Milana, Dr. Jeffries, Dr. Oben Joko, Dr.
Asante.
Just name it, Dr.
Yeah, that's my book right there.
The work is there. Oh, well, this book will do it all because it's already been
right. Here you go. In other words, you talk about a family affair. And this Molefi Asante took the initiative, but he realized the responsibility was a collective one. So he put in his team folks like my wife, Dr. Rosalind Jeffries, who helped to deal with some of the important issues. She was able to select much of the images used today. You had our brother, Booker Coleman. He's now Khomeini and doing great things. He made his contribution. And so this book is entitled African American History, A Journey of Liberation.
But let them know it is a textbook.
And it's a textbook. It has the dates. It has the lesson plans. It has you're not going to get anything better than this. This is done professionally by our people. And some white folks bought off. It was too powerful. And they bought the book publishing house, but that's not going to stop us. You have this. When my wife took
you
this,
can still get this book. This is all the curricula in place with the greatest scholars in the country. It's written to the standard of every state in America, available to be used in any classroom in America based on their structural context. So we don't have to invent this wheel. There's the wheel.
That's right. And when we took it to Brazil, because we go to Brazil every few years, and when we took it to Brazil, the vice president of Brazil, who was running a session of his government, when he saw this book, he kept coming back and forth. He had somebody else standing for him in the session. He said, this is what we need in Brazil. Because when you had the section on Brazil, you had the quilombos. He said, I've never seen the quilombos. Those were the African free communities that was established in Brazil, like we have in other parts of Africa. You have them in the southern part of the United States. You have them in the Caribbean. So the work has been done. We have to bring it up to date and use it in our homes, as well as in our institutions, our churches. And every church has Sunday schools and other schools. And so we've got to, and on this one here, you have the three giants, Harriet Tubman, Fred Douglass, and Martin Luther King. And then you turn it on the back, and then you got the other giants, W.E.B. Du Bois, Mary McLeod Bethune, educator, and Marcus Messiah Garvey. So we really have to understand that.
That is the curricula, and that is the textbook. Yes, you younger people, you've got more skills than we got, and you've got certain technology we don't have. You can improve upon it, but it's there. And the amount of literature that have been produced in the last 50 years is extraordinary. No people in the history of the world have produced the amount of in-depth literature in 50 years that we have produced here in African America. So do the research and do your work. We've done our time on the stage. We're getting ready to leave the stage, hopefully not too soon, but you know what I'm saying? We know we got to go. Get out of here. So it's y'all's time now. pick up the burden and carry it. Take the responsibility. We paid our dues. And I'm not ashamed to say that. Me and Dr. J, we've been rolling together for close to 50 years.
That's right. That's right.
Been friends and comrades and struggling side by side. We've never had a fight or an issue in 50 years. And we've been through some stuff. Okay.
You better believe it. And had nerve enough to become investors in Africa.
Hey,
in other words, we talked it and we did it. We purchased the whole
we tried to live the African principle as brothers.
Yeah.
And people don't understand what true brothership is, you know, and recognizing the God essence and particles in one another and help each other to grow.
Yeah.
You know?
And we want to remind James, we want to remind our audience that's listening to us that there's the HAPI film that can be purchased, and there are other materials. So Felicia, tell them about the other material.
Yes, the other materials. So we have the HAPI DVD, and you can get a digital download, or you can watch us at the screening, or you can DVD. And along with those DVDs, we also have Nubia, and we have the Tekken. I cannot find, I'm on location today, so I cannot find my HAPI DVD, but we have the HAPI DVDs, and we have the Tekken, and we have the Nubia. And we also have posters. We have nice T-shirts with the HAPI logo on there. So all these things have been thought of as love offerings, and so we just appreciate if if you guys can purchase if you're able to. And with what is it 3 trillion is it like what 3 trillion dollars?
When we put the Caribbean, Africa, and the African American together, we're the $5 trillion Black man.
There it is. So so I just want to tell
I'm busy.
Oh, I just want to thank everybody for coming through. And again, the video, we had about 80,000 hits on. We only have 6% of subscribers. So before you get off this here,
subscribe and help.
Yes, subscribe. Yes. You know what, Professor Small, you're going to have to make up a little rhyme about subscribing for the next one, because you always make up these really good, good poetic pieces. But yes, please subscribe to our channel so that we can keep bringing these things to you guys. And go to hapifilm.com. You can get everything there. You can get merchandise. You can read more about the film. You can see who is in this incredible documentary. We have Dr. Patricia Newton, Dr. Jacqueline DeBatalora, Dr. Julianne Malvo, Dr. Boyce Watkins, Dr. Solange Ashby. We have Dr. Raketi Aman, Infudishi Juhutimas, the other Dr. J, Dr. Rosalind Jeffries, Asar Imhotep. We have a lot of people in this documentary. It's very well
collection of Black folks.
Yes, scholars, historians, politicians. We have Charles Barron. So please just check out this film, and hopefully I can see you guys on October 3rd. So you want to take us out? So you know what, Dr. J, since you're the elder, why don't you go ahead and take us out?
Well, we always, when we formed the Sons of Africa, who were willing to sacrifice their lives in helping to protect us elders, we always had this Frederick Douglass statement that if there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom yet deprecate agitation are men and women who want the crops without plowing up the ground. They want the rain without the thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. This struggle may be a moral one, it may be a physical one, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, it never will. Find out what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found out the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them until they resisted with either words or blows or both. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress. The oppression of Black folk, we've got to resist it. We've got to put our plans in place to be the new successful Africans that have a consciousness and have an agenda and aren't going to be bought out. And that's what HAPI has forced us into. It's linked us up in ways that we could not have imagined. And so we want you to be a part of that and make the sacrifice we've made to make it a success. So thank everybody for what they've done. Thank those of you who see the possibility of helping us. And we need as much assistance as possible because the devil don't rest. And we need to have the godly folk and the folk who are spiritually connected stand up and shout that we are here. Africans are not only
subscribe.
Yeah.
Subscribe.
Right. Yep. So shout out to everyone. King Simon, Stay Balanced, Baba Yaga. He always says something really nice to me every time he gets on here. So thank you very much. And thank you to everybody. Michelle Jewell, these are all people I keep seeing all the time. Alex Little, everyone. Karen Miller, just everybody. Thank you so much. And peace.
Peace and blessings.
Peace and blessings.